how do we know he's upset?
Sarcasm.
Well, but I mean, like, where, like, what would be words, what would be lines here where you can go, okay, this is clearly a guy who is not happy. He seems to be with the steel companies more so than anything. So, final paragraph, Annalise.
He used words like unjustifiable.
Okay, so we got up here at the beginning, unjustifiable, irresponsible, defiance of the public interest. You take a look at what's going here. I asked each American to consider what he would do for his country and steel companies. We got their answer. What's he referring to with that last paragraph? When he has his inauguration speech, the most famous line of John F. Kennedy's presidential career is probably, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So he's playing off of that, where sometime I asked each American to consider what he would do for his country, and we got the answer, apparently from the steel companies, nothing. His second most famous line is when he called himself a donut in Berlin, but that's a whole
We use that as a device and call it pathos.
What, for this part?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, well, for here, you could do a couple things. I could see some folks, and we'll come back to pathos for sure. I could see some folks making reference that he's making an allusion to himself, which I guess it works, though. When you're president, you can do that kind of stuff. I could see some folks also use that as an attention grabber, and even though it's starting at the end of the passage, go John F. Kennedy upon his inauguration, asked what folks would be willing to do for their country. Clearly, the steel company is not doing anything, and he is very, very upset about it. You could kind of use that as a brainstormer for that. Pathos, remember, is going to be an emotional appeal. You could certainly use pathos over here, where you're certainly looking for some kind of concessions and sacrifices to take place. And I think if you really look throughout probably the first column, and there'd be some places in others, where else in that first column would you see a pretty strong emotional appeal? You're trying to get an emotional response from someone, Justin? Uh-huh. Right, and I mean, he even mentions, and I know this isn't the part that you were mentioning directly, he mentions the number of the 185 Americans, but we're talking about, we're asking reservists, leaving their homes, families, getting mentioned for every citizen, and he even does something that's a little, I think he's in that first paragraph, in the third one, starts mentioning those items, homes, autos, appliances, that for every American family. Then here's the part that Justin was talking about, businessman, farmer, where you're pretty much touching all the different aspects out there. He even does a part where, where did it go? I saw it and then it went away. He does something with a pronoun, where he doesn't want to come off as being the politician, but he comes off as being, yeah.
Did she say we?
Yeah.
Oh, we are.
Where's the as I do? I lost the line number 4.
The American people find it hard as I do. 16.
Thank you. There we go. As I do, to accept the situation where you have those tiny handful. There we go. So not only is he kind of creating that emotional connection that this is going to affect all different facets of American life, but he even kind of links himself in there with every citizen. You think about, politicians and whatnot, usually there's a bit of a separation that we would think of. And with the Kennedy family, a big complaint about Kennedy leading up into the election is this is a political family, wealthy family powerhouse. They don't know what is going on with the regular average American citizen. He's certainly doing something to connect himself with them. So there's absolutely a lot of emotional appeal happening all throughout here. Servicemen, women, mentioning those who have died recently in Vietnam. Yeah, you're trying to get that emotional response coming from the listener.
Kind of going along with Justin, right? He said he has repeats one
Mm-hmm. And you have a lot of and for some of them you could certainly go with like anaphora, where you have the repetition at the beginning. Parallel structure would work, where it could be a we are. It could even be something of what would it do? Well, it would increase the cost. It would increase the cost. It doesn't say increase the cost, but seriously handicap our efforts, where you keep reinforcing that repetition of what those negative effects are going to be. So you could have something such as anaphora. If you called it parallelism, you would be okay. If you called it repetition, that would certainly still end up being acceptable as well. Some folks might even just kind of go with the syntax for it as well. But he certainly creates kind of like an us versus them mentality. We're the American citizens. This is a greedy corporation. They're not doing what they should be doing.
And also in the second column around line 75, line 80, basically saying like, in order to like go along with the economy at that point, you could have found ways to do a lot of different stuff that actually benefited both you and other Americans, but instead you just decided to raise the price.
Well, yeah, I mean, all throughout that whole second column, he's basically mentioning all the good benefits that they have had. They could be exploring better things to do, where they have recognition of lower costs. They have a really good labor contract. When you're taking a look at, you have exceeded $600 million each of the last 5 years. According to the Wall Street Journal, they're going to have their first quarter is going to be the highest in history. You have the parts up here where it's mentioning that the price for steel output in 1961, it's the same as it was in 1958. There really doesn't seem to be, therefore, a reason as to why you should increase steel prices whatsoever. You get a lot of numbers kind of coming your way. And it's not a device that we typically use, especially with fiction. But when you're dealing with nonfiction, and it would be a device that a fair number of you were using with Grapes of Wrath at the beginning of the year, if you're getting numbers, if you're getting things like auto, home, appliances, he's giving you specific details. I'm not a big fan of details in general, because say you were to use details for a Flannery O'Connor essay and you're talking about, the details of the names that are getting used with the characters, chances are you could have used something else like name symbols or details that could have gone with imagery. But if you're getting specific stuff like this, he's certainly giving you details as to why you should be on the citizen side, not the steel company side. I don't know if he does this on purpose or not, or whoever wrote the speech, does this on purpose or not. It's a speech. It's not a press release. It's not an article that would be showing up in the, in the New York Times or anything like that. Don't read along. Just listen to the first paragraph. Simultaneous and identical action of United States Steel and other leading steel corporations increasing steel prices by some $6 a ton constitute a wholly unjustifiable and irresponsible defiance of the public interest. Besides the unjustifiable and irresponsible defiance, which kind of got mentioned, what word? Steel. Steel. Steel.
Oh, because they're stealing money.
3 times in like 3 lines. United States Steel and other leading steel corporations increasing steel prices by some $6 a ton. If you are listening to it, yes, he's certainly talking about the item itself, but if you're trying to emphasize the greediness, it kind of becomes a bit of a pun that you have steel going to steel. You're trying to emphasize that idea. Again, you notice it more if you're going to be listening to it probably than if you're reading it, because when you read it with the double E, you're thinking of the product itself. Also keep in mind, 1960s, so we're talking like 60 years ago almost. What product gets used in most of the goods that we use? How most of the stuff is made is plastic. If you're going back 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, it's not plastic, it's metal. We were at my mom's house last week. Girls like to play with my old toys, old Transformers and all that kind of stuff. Optimus Prime in 1986 was made out of metal.
That's awesome.
It is still there. The plastic parts have gotten destroyed because of plastic, but the main part of the toy is metal. You take a look at my dad's old toys growing up, you know, in the 1940s, they are 100% metal, well, 99% metal, with maybe some other stuff. So metal, steel, certainly in 1962 is going to play a much bigger part. And so those homes, those appliances, you know, certainly automobiles, it's going to resonate more with the readers. Pathos, anaphora, details, even mentioned pun. Anything else? This is Secretary McNamara, Wall Street Journal, Acting Commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics has informed me.
Celebrity.
Not quite a celebrity endorsement, but what is he establishing?
I got people.
Validity.
I got people who know a guy who knows a guy.
Credibility, which it's not pathos, but it is ethos. Logos is the logical appeal. So not only do you have the President of the United States, and there is some ethos that kind of comes along with being the president, but the fact that he is mentioning where this stuff is coming from certainly is also going to kind of add to the credibility. So it doesn't seem as if he has an individual axe to grind with any one corporation or any one business person. This isn't meant to be a political agenda that's being done, but look at all the numbers that we have, look at the price per annum of steel output, look at where we're getting our information from. You can clearly tell that they need to do something to be more responsible. Pathos was getting mentioned earlier. You could certainly take a look at specific diction if you wanted as well. Not thinking so much steel that's getting used, but this whole idea about unjustifiable, irresponsible, defiance of the public interest. If you wanted to use some type of diction, specific word choice at areas, that would be fine. It's a lengthy passage, but it gives you a ton of options that you could pull from, because chances are, probably going to use two of them. But you are getting enough examples of those two. If you were to take any one of those and you start to like explain, keep in mind with your quotations, you're starting to get in the habit of doing shorter quotes. Just in 6 words or less with Flannery O'Connor. You could pick a couple little things here and there, reservists, American families, farmers, things like that. As long as the reader can tell that you're pulling that information from the text, you're going to be fine. So I think initially some folks might go, wait a minute, this is political, it's a lengthy passage, but if you take a look at what he's saying, there's certainly enough ammunition for you to pull from it, so you'd be able to put together an essay without hopefully too much difficulty. And then you get it right about certainty and doubt. You feel uncertain about your
What did he say?
certainty, or doubtful about your AP grade. You go, oh no.
Oh, well, I didn't need
But
that.
you saved the post office earlier in the day with your essay, so
Maybe.
that would, you know.
You might have burned the post office.
You might, or you might read system.
It's a pretty pessimistic AP exam. We got the failing post office, economic distress, and then a lot of doubt taking place in the last essay. Oh well, some years are like that.
What?